Okay, so you're thinking about reading Colleen Hoover's Verity, but maybe not sure if it's worth all the hype. It's gotten so much attention, but some people just hate it.
It really is one of those love it or hate it books. Super popular, though, that's for sure.
So kind of risky then.
Yeah, like a recipe that looks incredible, but, might not actually taste good.
Okay, so who exactly is this book perfect for? Who should rush out to grab it, and who should maybe avoid it?
Okay, so if you want a fast, exciting read that's got tons of romance, and you don't mind, like, over-the-top plot twists or characters that aren't super deep, then Verity might be your thing. But if you're into thrillers that make you think more, have complex characters and build suspense slowly, you might want to pass.
So more about what happens than who it happens to.
Exactly. It'll keep you turning pages, for sure, but it's not going to leave you thinking about human nature or anything like that.
Gotcha. So for those still on board, what's the basic idea? No spoilers, of course.
All right, so we have Lowen Ashleigh. She's a writer who's not doing too well. She gets this chance to finish a book series for this famous author, Verity Crawford, who's been hurt. Lowen moves into the family's house to work, right, and finds Verity's autobiography. And let me tell you, this autobiography is messed up. It throws everything into question.
A struggling writer, a mysterious manuscript, a family with secrets. Sounds a little bit like The Haunting of Hill House meets Gone Girl, maybe.
You're getting it. This book tries to do a lot. Suspense, romance, even erotica. And that's where things get a bit messy.
Wait, hold up. Erotica. Like in a thriller.
Yep, that's right. Verity gets pretty steamy. Might surprise some readers. The sex scenes are, well, that's frequent and pretty graphic. There's this one scene where someone bites a headboard during sex.
Okay, that's an interesting choice for sure. Yeah, I can see how someone expecting a straight-up thriller might not be into that.
Right. It's like Hoover took the thriller formula, was like, let's spice things up a bit. Literally.
So genre-bending plot, some spicy content. What about the writing itself? Is it good?
Well, Hoover's style is pretty straightforward and easy to read. That's part of why she's so popular. But in Verity, that simplicity kind of backfires. The writing isn't really strong enough to handle the dark and complex themes it tries to tackle. For example, Lowen lost her mom, right? And it's mentioned but not explored much. It just doesn't feel as powerful as it should, especially with all the other crazy things happening.
Sounds like Hoover prioritizes shock value and plot twists over, like, character development and making you feel things deeply.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's a common complaint. And that leads us to another problem. The characters, they're just not that interesting.
Lowen Jeremy, you mean?
Right. Lowen, she's the main character, but she feels kind of one-dimensional. We don't really get to know her backstory or what makes her tick. And then there's Jeremy, the husband of the injured author. His whole situation is a mess. I mean, he lost his twin daughters, and his wife tried to take her own life. But he seems, I don't know, almost fine with it all.
Yeah, that doesn't seem very realistic. You'd think he'd be more, well, broken.
Exactly. And it's not just that they're not developed enough. Some of the stuff they do, like starting a romantic relationship while Verity's in a coma in the same house, is just messed up.
Wow. Yeah, that's not great.
It is, and the book doesn't really talk about whether it's right or wrong, which some people find, well, problematic.
So a messy plot, questionable characters, and writing that isn't amazing. Anything else working against this book?
Well, there's the main conflict, it revolves around this disturbing manuscript, and then a letter pops up later that makes you question everything.
Ah, the classic unreliable narrator trick.
You got it. Verity gets compared to Gone Girl a lot because of this. Both books have unreliable narrators and big twists to keep you guessing. But Gone Girl does it so well, and Verity doesn't quite hit the mark.
How come?
This letter, it's supposed to be a huge reveal, but it feels forced, like Hoover was trying too hard to shock us. It ends up feeling kind of cheap and not earned.
A twist, just for the sake of a twist.
Exactly. It's missing that cleverness that a really good twist has. Speaking of comparisons, let's talk about how Verity stacks up against other similar books.
Okay, let's do it. What are we comparing it to?
So Verity is often grouped with psychological thrillers like The Silent Patient, that's by Alex Michaelides, or The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn, but it just doesn't have the depth of those books.
How so? What makes them different?
Well, take The Silent Patient. It's also a thriller, twisty, unreliable narrator, the whole deal, but the plot is so much tighter, and it really gets into why the characters do what they do. It's also got this atmosphere, this suspense that builds slowly, which Verity doesn't really have.
So it's like Verity is trying to do too much and not really nailing any of it?
Yeah, you could say that. Thriller, romance, commentary on otherhood, mental illness, it's all in there. But it doesn't fully commit to any of it. Jack of all trades, master of none, as they say.
Okay, so not quite a thriller, not quite a romance, but I've heard it's a really quick read, right?
Oh yeah, it flies by. Short chapters, cliffhangers, all that keeps you hooked. A real page turner.
Like a roller coaster, but for books.
Exactly. Fun, fast, and over before you know it.
But isn't that a good thing? I mean, sometimes you just want a book you can devour in a day.
Sure, some people love that, but the problem with Verity is that by going so fast, it doesn't have time for the characters to grow or for the themes to really sink in. It's all plot, all the time.
So it's trading depth for speed.
Pretty much. If you want a book that stays with you, makes you think Verity might not be it.
Okay, so we've got the plot, the characters, the writing style, the pacing, all important stuff when deciding if a book is worth reading. But let's step back for a second. What does Verity's popularity, even with all its problems, tell us about what people want to read these days?
That's a great question, and it really reflects a trend in popular fiction. People are drawn to books that are fast, exciting, and emotionally gripping, even if they aren't, literary masterpieces.
It's like fast food, but for books. Satisfying in the moment, but not very nourishing.
Exactly. Verity is perfect for a plane ride or a day at the beach. Entertaining, a way to escape, but not something you'll probably reread or recommend to your book club.
Okay, I think I'm getting a clearer picture of Verity, but for those still on the fence, let's cut to the chase. Is it worth reading?
That depends on what you're after. If you want a quick, engaging read, lots of suspense and romance, and you don't mind crazy plot twists or characters that aren't super complex, then Verity could be good for you.
So, like a guilty pleasure read, not high literature.
Exactly, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you just want a fun, easy book, but you got to go into Verity with the right expectations.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so we've covered a lot. The plot, characters, writing, how compared to other books. We talked about what's good and bad about it, who might enjoy it. But before we finish this deep dive, I want to leave you with one last thing to think about.
Go for it.
Verity, even with its flaws, brings up some interesting questions about truth and how powerful stories can be. Right? It makes you think about how what we believe is real is often shaped by the stories we tell ourselves and others. And it makes you wonder, how much can we really trust what we see, especially when it comes to people we love?
That's a pretty powerful listener.
It is. So if you do decide to read Verity, keep that in mind. Don't just focus on the twists and turns. Think about what the story's really saying.
Good advice.
All right, that's all we have for today's deep dive into Verity. We hope this helped you figure out if you want to add it to your to-read list. And if you've already read it, tell us what you thought. We'd love to hear your take on this controversial book. And it reminds us that the stories that really get to us, the most disturbing ones, are often the ones that feel, too close to home.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we totally map up, though, there's one more thing we haven't touched on, the ending.
Oh, yeah, the ending. So without spoilers, how did you feel about it? Did it work for you, or were there some loose ends?
Honestly, the ending of Verity is probably one of the most talked about parts of the book. Some people find it shopping and satisfying, while others think it's rushed or unbelievable, even frustrating.
I could see that. We've already established that Verity loves a good twist, so I'm guessing the ending tries to go out with a bang, one last mind-blowing reveal.
You got it. It definitely aims for that shock value, but whether it succeeds really depends on what you like and what you've come to expect from the book by that point.
So if you're already hooked on the story and all the twists, the ending might feel like a perfect way to wrap up all the suspense and mystery. But if you're looking for something more, emotionally satisfying or something that makes sense on a deeper level, it might not deliver.
Exactly. It's a bit like a roller coaster that suddenly slams on the brakes. You might be buzzing from the ride, but you're also a little dizzy and not sure what to make of it.
I think that's a great way to describe reading Verity overall. It's exciting and suspenseful, but it also leaves you with this feeling of unease, maybe even a little disappointed.
You hit the nail on the head, and it goes back to what we talked about before, the book's strengths and weaknesses. Verity is definitely a fun, addictive read, but it doesn't have the depth and complexity that would make it a truly memorable or thought-provoking book.
So would you recommend Verity to a friend, but with a warning? Like, hey, this is a fun, twisty read, but don't expect too much.
Precisely. It's a great book for the beach or a long plane ride, but it's not something you'll necessarily want to analyze with friends or read over and over.
That makes sense. And I think that's helpful for our listeners. Knowing what to expect from a book can really make a difference in whether you enjoy it or not.
Totally agree. And that's really what we're all about here on the Deep Dive. We want to give you the info and insights you need to decide what you want to read.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So if you're still curious about Verity, go ahead and check it out. See if it lives up to all the buzz. Just remember to go in with the right expectations.
And let us know what you think. We always love to hear from our listeners, especially about books that are as divisive as Verity.
That's really a good book discussion is always welcome, even if it's about a book that people have strong feelings about. Now, on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and happy reading.